Good afternoon, my name is Brendan, this is Lauren, and today we're going to be talking about Jacob Stegenga's view on medical nihilism. Lauren, can you give us a brief overview of what this means?
Sure. So Jacob Stegenga is a philosopher who's spent a lot of his time looking at medical nihilism, which is just the view that our confidence in medical interventions ought to be low. It's more specifically looking at modern day medicine and medications rather than surgery or interventions like that.
And why should it be low?
Should be low because we've seen over the last 10-15 years a big rise in prescriptions and pharmaceuticals and drugs when the evidence to back that up just hasn't been there. Jacob Stegenga's research focuses on why that is in his master argument, which we'll get into.
And why is this a problem?
So along with the increase in prescription and medications and things like that, we've seen an increase in confidence in the medications which aren't backed up by science, and any science that does back them up has been cherry-picked. And it's just not a representation of valid information that we should be using.
Okay, then let's get into Jacob Stegenga's master argument. What is it and what does it mean?
Sure. So Jacob Stegenga's master argument is used to back up the view of medical nihilism. So he uses Bayes' theorem to explain three premises. So the first premise is that the prior probability of the effectiveness of medical intervention is low, and we can see that through the history of medicine, where we do have a few what Jacob Stegenga refers to as magic bullets, where you've got vaccines or insulin and they're clear, effective medical interventions. But other than those rare magic bullets, the effectiveness of medical intervention has been insignificant.
And what's the second premise?
So the second premise is more current, and it just focuses on the evidence for today's research, and we just see that the effectiveness of medical intervention today is also very minimal.
And what's the third premise?
So the third premise is that the evidence to suggest that the medication is effective is high. The third premise is the premise that we're going to be spending the most time on, and we're just going to be demonstrating why Jacob Stegenga's argument is valid. So the reason why the probability is high is due to biased medical research. So this is things like biased measuring instruments, biased subject recruiting, so excluding people based on their age or comorbidities, or if they're using other prescription drugs, publication bias, so not including studies that weren't successful or only publishing studies that show what they want you to show. And p-hacking.
What is p-hacking?
So p-hacking is just when you misuse data analysis to make the probability of something occur seem more significant than it really is.
So it's just drawing attention to things that aren't actually factually important.
Yeah, so you could have a data set, and when you misuse the data analysis, you could make a series of conclusions that aren't accurate just based on how you're analysing the data.
Yeah, so it's just like blowing up parts of the data that you actually want instead of what's actually the facts.
Yeah.
And why is biased medical research an issue?
So biased medical research is an issue because it's not guiding pharmaceutical companies in the right direction. We want the medications and medical interventions to be reflecting what's effective and what's actually going to be treating these things. We see a big increase again, the problem is that we're seeing a big increase in pharmaceutical companies manufacturing medications based on their profit rather than their effectiveness, and we can really see that here with this premise being high. So in this premise, Jacob Stegenga makes 2 points: that medical science is highly malleable, so you can kind of pick and choose which outcomes are in favour, and the second point is that people, more specifically pharmaceutical companies, are more inclined to take advantage of that malleability in medical science to work it in their favour. So, for example, with publication bias, only about 23% of studies are actually published, so that leaves a large majority of studies that potentially might refute what we know unpublished and unknown. We've also seen a big increase in probability hacking, so increasing the significance of data just to make your results seem more effective.
And what's a real-world example of this data manipulation?
So, example, a drug that treated type 2 diabetes, there were 42 studies done and only 7 were published in favour of the drug seeming effective, and that company actually faced a lawsuit for not publishing all 42 of those studies.
And what impact does this biased medical research have on the future of medicine?
So if we keep going down the trend of picking and choosing what research and data to use, we're not really getting effective, accurate data. So this would result in inaccurate effects, inaccurate research, and therefore inaccurate medical interventions. And this really pushes a drive towards pharmaceuticals just developing drugs for profit instead of health.
Wrapping up, what can be done to avoid this medical bias and data manipulation in the future?
So medical nihilism suggests that we could have stringent rules on what data is allowed to be included or excluded, data manipulation, research agendas, clinical practice. So to avoid biased medical research in the future, we need to have stricter rules on what companies are allowed to include or exclude in their research, especially more strict rules on data analysis and especially publishing all research and not just research in favour of effective treatments. We need to include treatments that aren't effective as well to get a really good idea of medical intervention in the broader scheme of things. So the view of medical nihilism really can refocus us to effective medical intervention and away from this bigger problem of pharmaceutical companies just reaching their profit margins.
Okay, well, thanks for sitting down and talking about medical nihilism and the type of issues that medical research is facing right now and what can be done in the future to avoid that.
That's okay. I really hope this has shed a bit of light on the current problems we're facing with the effectiveness of medicine in today's society.
Thanks, I appreciate it.